All right, so let's take a look at what we have last time. We have a dialogue panel here. And what I'd like to do is if we walk up to this character, the dialogue panel appears. That's what I'd like for it to happen. So what I'm going to do is, let me go ahead and delete Sally out of this scene. For testing purposes, because I've deleted her out because we didn't have that last time. We just have this dialogue panel and it was active. Is inside of our playable character, our art playable characters folder, just grab a character. I'll grab Theo this time just for the heck of it. I'm just going to place him by this spawn point, and then I'm going to turn off my dialogue panel. So really it should just function where you can kind of like walk up to this character, and then what we'll do is maybe we'll have that character disappear after the dialogue panel. And let's see, what is this null reference exception here? Level manager script. We'll look into that later. Let's see, level manager. No, it's all there. I think it's just an order of operations thing like we talked about last time, where it found this late, and so we're getting that null reference because there's only one thing that we're referencing, and that's this. Okay, so with that said, we're going to need a script. So let's go to scripts here, and I'm going to make a new folder in here, and let's just call this quest system. And inside this quest system, I'll throw my dialogue manager in there. So I'm going to right click, create C# script, and I'm going to call this, let's see, dialogue manager, like that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, and what I'll do is I'll do a side-by-side with my dialogue manager to the left and right. All right, so let's go ahead and incorporate TextMesh Pro. We're going to use those libraries, right, to make our dialogue panel appear as well as get some text in there. And down here, let's go ahead and create a couple of variables. Now, what I did instead is kind of used a couple key identifiers here, like wrote assign inspector, use TMP text instead of text. These are just sort of here because I want you guys to sort of as a placeholder for you to learn. You wouldn't necessarily write this in unless you have a very junior group of programmers. But let's go ahead and save this. And then what I want to do is make sure this gets connected again to my canvas. So select your canvas and just make sure it's there. And then what I want to do is under that panel that we created earlier, this dialog panel, I want to drag that into dialog panel. And really we could move this up and switch it because the dialog panel is sort of first and then the TextMesh Pro or the text box is underneath it. And so let's grab that. And what we want to do in this particular script is we want to just control the functionality of when we want to show it. And then remember, we're doing like single responsibility, essentially theory, right? Or the principle of single responsibility, which means this really just controls the dialogue manager. And then we'll have another script where it'll activate the dialogue manager. So let's create a couple public variables or methods rather, and I'm just going to place them in here. Okay, so just kind of like pausing the video so you don't have to watch me type all that stuff out. But you can see here we have a public method called show dialog, and it's going to take in a message, right? And once we call this from that trigger script, it's going to set our panel to active. So remember, we have a dialog panel here, which we dragged in, and it's going to turn it on. And then it's going to make this text message equal to whatever message we pass in, because we're making this sort of kind of global, these parameters, because you might meet different characters and they might have different messages. And then there's going to be times when I exit the trigger that we're going to want to hide or turn our panel off again. Okay. And also what we might do is if we know the character is never going to be seen again, we'll create a player script here. And this player script, all it does is it sets the player to active or inactive after we meet them. We'll work on that. So let's go ahead and create the next script. I'm actually going to close out a lot of these other ones. They're sort of clouding my space here a little bit. And just make sure to save that. And let's make another script. So I'm going to right click and create another C# script. And I'm just going to call this quest giver. And that's what this character is here. So we have our mushroom girl, which we put under like level. This is going to be like, we can make this level art if we want. And this is also where we would start putting things like these squares, just so it doesn't, and you eventually want to put your own art or rename them something else. Now, the princess or girl mushroom here is going to get the quest giver script, but we also need a box collider 2D on this character. And just going to move her up just a little bit. And the reason for that is they have this option here called is trigger. And what this will do, if we leave it off, here, let's turn off our dialog manager as well really quick. Which is under our canvas. What a collider does, as you probably already know because we've kind of covered this before, is it just creates a collision area so that you can't walk through the character, right? So see how I'm kind of stopping as I walk in? But what a trigger allows you to do is as you're entering that area, it creates an area that we can enter. And as we enter that area, it'll trigger some sort of event. And the event we want to do is trigger show dialog. Okay, so let's go ahead and grab our quest giver script and just drag it inside of Visual Studio or Writer, or double click it and it'll open it up. And the first thing we're going to need is access to our dialog manager script. So let's go ahead and create a variable for that. All right, so we have our dialog manager script and we'll give it a second. And in our quest giver script, it should pop up. And all I'm going to do is wherever script has that dialog manager script on there. And if you recall, our canvas has that dialog manager script. And so what we'll do is we'll access, let's grab our mushroom girl here. We'll access those two, the text box, so that this character can put in custom text in that area, as well as turning on that dialog panel. So we're going to need another variable, and that's just going to be a string, and that's going to give us access. Let me zoom in a little bit here. That's going to give us, we're going to create the actual dialogue that's in here that this particular character is going to say. All right, so here's our private string. I just called it quest dialog. You could fit it all in one line, but I just made it 2 lines just because I want to make this big enough where you can copy it. All this is saying is it's storing a string of text here and it's saying, can you take this letter to the king at the top of the hill? Perfect. Now what we want to do is we want to do a method which is pre-made by Unity, and it's just called onTriggerEnter2D. And what that method is going to do is it's going to set our dialog manager to active, and it's also going to call our dialog manager here, the show dialog, and it's going to pass in that text about taking the letter to the king into here, which is going to display it on the screen, and it's also going to set it to active. So let's go ahead and I'm going to type that method out. All right, so let's go line by line here. This is a pre-made method inside of Unity's API, and what it is as we trigger, remember we checked on that trigger, we're going to check if the other collider here has a tag of player, which it does. And if we do, we're going to call dialog manager, that's the script here, .show dialog. And then we're going to pass in this line of text into quest dialog. Remember, quest dialog here is, it's going to store that into this message string and it's going to paste it there. And then when you call this right away, it's going to set it to active. So let's go ahead and hit Control S to save this and let's see if this works. All right, so we walk in here and boom, can you take this letter to the king at the top of the hill? That's pretty awesome. And then we also have this little debug message here just to, as I always have those in there, sort of a check if this doesn't work, what can happen next. Great. You probably noticed there's another problem here. It doesn't go away, right? And so we are kind of stuck, right? We're like, oh no, this is the worst. But what's nice is there's an onTriggerExit2D as well. And what we can do with that is pretty much the same thing. But remember we built in this failsafe here in the dialog manager where we hide our panel. So public void hide dialog, and we're going to set it to false. We're just going to call this, and that's going to set it to false from here when we exit that box. So we'll be turning on and off that text. Let's take a look at that code. All right, so this is pretty simple here too. As we exit that collider, we're going to check if our tag is a player. And if it is, we're just going to hide the dialog. So let's go ahead and press play here. And let's see if we exit or enter that text. Boom. And then if I walk away, it goes away. Perfect. So we always have we have a very simple dialog system, and we have a way of hiding it when we exit our trigger.